Okay, we're live. Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris Garner, joined with George Aldridge to give our review on Darkest Hour, which is the 2017 British war drama film directed by Joe Wright, starring Gary Oldman. And as we're heading in towards Academy Awards season and BAFTAs and just awards in general, this is a hot favourite, maybe for Best Picture, definitely for hair and makeup, and probably at this point, definitely for lead performance. How are you doing tonight, George?
I'm very well. I'm very patriotic. No,
yes, because this movie is British propaganda. Clearly,
this is British propaganda, and well, no, it's not. That was more of a joke. That's more of a dig at that terrible review who did that awful Dunkirk thing where apparently we're all murderers and scavengers. And no, I think I was before we get into what I say about this is that on our channel I've always been. Not the history one, but I've always liked my sort of modern history.
Yeah.
So I've always had a bit of excitement for these kind of films. That's why Oscars has been very boring recently because we haven't had many dramas. I remember we had The Imitation Game a couple of years ago.
Yes, yeah.
But we don't really get many. And this year we got like Dunkirk and basically Darkest Hour, which is in brackets Dunkirk.
And this is still technically a 2017 movie, so I guess the second Winston Churchill film of 2017.
Yes, there was the Brian Cox one. I think that was set toward the end of it. I haven't seen that, won't I?
No, I haven't seen that either.
But this is, I guess, the main thing we can say about this film. We don't have a schedule. I guess that's one thing to say.
Yeah, no.
But this is a Churchill film, but the reality is this is Gary Oldman's film.
Yeah, well, it is, and in many ways it isn't, because we were talking about because other war films like this that you've had in award season, as you mentioned, Imitation Game recently, you had The King's Speech. All these kind of movies tend to do really, really well, both in performance and in Best Picture category. And if we go into The King's Speech, for example, which obviously happens at the same time, focuses on King George. Winston Churchill was in that movie, played by Timothy Spall. I absolutely love that performance, and I think we actually watched on TV, didn't we, The King's Speech fairly recently, a couple of months ago, when it was the lead up to this movie, Darkest Hour, and we're talking about different portrayals, because we had the trailer for Darkest Hour out at that point. And I really loved Timothy Spall's take on Winston Churchill, and that up until that point was my favourite. But when you watch this movie, I don't see Gary Oldman in this film at all. It sounds really cliche, but I see Churchill. There is not one point in this movie where I go, wow, Gary Oldman's doing a really great performance, which of course he is. But you are from the opening scene of him with him in it, he dominates that performance as Churchill.
It took me, I don't know why I keep coughing.
No, I'm coughing tonight. Sorry about that, guys. Watching at home.
It took me about maybe a minute to get into this film. Gary Oldman's already won the Golden Globe. He's nominated for BAFTA. He will be nominated for the Oscar. He will probably win both. I think I said a year ago, this is Oldman's year. Forget your Leonardo DiCaprio deserves or nonsense. I said, you probably find a tweet from 4 years ago. I think I remember saying something about why is everyone so obsessed with Leo winning Oscar? Where's Gary Oldman's? So this year is the year. He's one of my favourite British actors of all time. One of my favourite actors of all time. I urge everybody to watch Leon. Which was without doubt one of his best performances. Obviously, your bog standard, get your Harry Potters in because he's amazing, especially Azkaban. But anyway, Gary Oldman, he is an absolute hero to British cinema, and an amazing person as well.
Yeah.
And it obviously everyone knows that I remember when they dropped the first post of the trailer, I was like, that's Gary Oldman as Churchill. You can't tell it's Gary Oldman. When the film started, his first scene, maybe 30 seconds to a minute in, I went from this is Gary Oldman in makeup because it was more that I was taking this is Gary Oldman because obviously it's Churchill, and it took me 30 seconds to forget, and then you know it's Churchill, especially when you get him in the suits and the bowler hats and the stuff like that, the very sort of iconic Churchill stuff. Yeah, obviously the first scene, spoiler, is just him in pajamas in bed, so that's something the papers would never have seen.
I loved his intro though, because it seemed like even the film knew that this performance was a big deal. So when he's revealed he's in his darkened bedroom and he strikes a match for his cigar and you get a little bit of his face, then the curtains open. That's your big reveal.
Yeah, because they have a massive reveal. They build up to it before a couple of Parliament things and not being there. They truly build up to it amazingly. But one thing, I mentioned cigars, I've got to say, I read that they spent $20,000 on cigars that Gary Oldman smoked for this film.
Jesus.
So I hope he's come out all right.
Yeah, and the drink as well. I'm sure they diluted that down or they had something to stand by, but
they would have needed to. But it's
Wow.
almost he is. I mean, he's the talking point in the film. It's a fantastic film, but Gary Oldman is truly outstanding. And the thing is, in the modern day of we all love our CGI, we love our motion capture, being able to give a performance being like nothing like them. And I think Gary Oldman actually said, when on he used to play Call of Duty back in the good days, he was the voice in World at War of the Russian soldier you play in campaign.
Oh, what's it? Oh.
Reznov. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know I remember my COD history, but not that much.
Mm.
I remember finding out it was Gary Oldman. I was like, what? I did an interview saying I love the fact that I can give my voice to something, and it doesn't have to be me. They don't have to see me. I can do stuff I couldn't have done before.
Mm.
The makeup has now elevated that to something else. Because originally, a couple of years ago, someone said Gary Oldman's going to play Churchill. He's either going to have to get fat and get a receding hairline, or it's going to be motion capture.
Mm.
And they did this in makeup, and that is a incredible job by the makeup and that department, the art department. They're going to get that Oscar without a shadow of a doubt. I don't normally talk about Oscars in videos, but I guess this is. I mean, last year I don't think I did a single Oscar video except our live stream.
Yeah,
Normally I shy away from Oscar season because I'm not a big fan of the whole bravado of it. I do watch it. I do love it, but you know what I'm like, Chris. I get stuff like La La Land bores me. But this year has been very competitive. I'm looking forward to it, and it's amazing to see a film on one of Britain's most important prime ministers using one of our best actors, and it's stunning. And also, I want to say, the Netflix show The Crown. I've got family midway through a binge of it. John Lithgow plays Churchill in it, and he won. Okay. I know he doesn't.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to picture. I haven't seen The Crown yet. I've heard nothing but good things, but I didn't know he was playing Churchill.
He won an Emmy for it. And I've seen a picture, and I was speaking to my dad about it yesterday, and he said, it took me 5 minutes to get into it because I've seen one actor play him for the last week on telly. Now I've got someone else, but Oldman, hands down, is the one.
Yeah, and I mean, with all the makeup, like acting through the makeup and everything, and it wasn't just like the voice, like anyone can like give it their best Churchill impression, but his mannerisms, the way he walks, the way he paced, just the way he like mumbled and like was lost in his thoughts, everything absolutely encapsulated that performance. Fantastic.
Hand gestures, he's very famous for doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oldman becomes him. It's a horrible cliche, but it's so true in this case. The research and the passion that he would have had to put into this performance to get it spot on. The voice, the hardest thing I thought was the voice. This isn't a criticism at all. You can hear Gary Oldman's voice and it's still, but it does become that of Churchill's. But there are some moments when there's just that Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but when he's doing the famous wartime speeches, it is perfect. He is exceptional. And you just know that if they do another Churchill like film again, if they do another one, I can picture people coming up to him. Similar to, I think there's this one German guy that always plays Hitler in these films about Hitler. He played him in Downfall. I think it was the same guy that played him in Glorious Bastards. Maybe not, but played him in a couple of films. So I don't know if it will become a trend to try and get Goldman in to play
well, this is kind of what I wanted to say. Like, there's moments in the film where, like, obviously it's said the same time as Dunkirk. And like obviously Dunkirk came out this year. It was on our top 5 list. It was your number 1, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Of course, it was your number 1. So there's moments in the film where like Dunkirk's getting mentioned, and in my head I'm like, this would be really sweet if we could have some kind of like World War II cinematic universe. So bring Gary Oldman back to play Churchill in some other World War II movie, and just let's get this going. If we could do a cinematic universe about anything else, why not World War II at this point?
It's bring in Nolan, do the Battle of Britain next, which in historical terms followed straight after Dunkirk. Bring in Gary Oldman, he's worked with him on the Dark Knight trilogy. You've got yourself a dynamic duo. Yeah, it's amazing the fact that Dunkirk's, I mean, I think it was a film in the 60s, but it's never really had attention before. Like, we know about it as British history and stuff, but history shies on D-Day, the latter stage of the war. You don't really hear much about the early stages. So it's been not amazing to get Dunkirk, but to get Darkest Hour too, because I think I messaged you this after I saw it, that they benefit each other so well, because people might think, oh, it's the same film. It's like that White House Down, and it's nothing like them.
It's completely different.
This is the politics film, and it's all about the politics, and there's maybe one shot of the boats, one shot of a beach, and whereas Dunkirk is no politics, purely the soldiers on the beach. So the films have compensated each other really well, which I think is not making me feel patriotic at all, but it's been really cool to get that on screen the last year, to get sort of two big films of history that go work in hand with each other. Obviously, there was a Churchill film last year, but that was set, I think, at the last stages of World War II.
Yeah.
But my word, and I guess there's another thing to say. I don't know if you still want to say about Gary Oldman, but there is another one.
And the last thing I was going to say is, like, usually with like Academy Awards season, I don't really get swept up in like performances, because I see it as like they've all turned in great performances. Awards not going to take that away from whoever doesn't win and stuff. But with this year, obviously the big two are Daniel Day-Lewis and Gary Oldman. And Day-Lewis has got his title of retirement, so that's why he might get it. But this year, I really want Oldman to get it. I guess that's all I have to say on his performance now, is that he deserves it for this. But I know he's going up against Day-Lewis's final role. Wait for 10 years, he'll come back. But I don't know. He really deserves it for this one. But yeah, I've said everything I can on Gary Oldman at this point.
Everyone's talking about Gary Oldman, but there is another that no one is talking about, and it saddens me. Obviously, everyone's seen King's Speech. Colin Firth won Best Actor for playing King George VI. I think King George is on The Crown as well at some point. He's been done on cinema a couple of times. We have Ben Mendelsohn in this film, our beloved director clinic. Without doubt, a severely underrated actor that is really starting to not get around more, because that sounds horrible, but he...
Especially in light of what Hollywood is nowadays.
Yes. He is someone that's breaking into Hollywood. It's a bit of a Mark Rylance, a slightly older age. He's done some very, very good films under the radar, done some blockbusters to his name. I think he's going to be in Ready Player One as the villain. He's a fantastic villain. He is actually, going back to what's a year ago, I'd rather he played Scar in the Lion King film. Now you're down for it. He is King George, and everyone's probably thinking Colin Firth. It was so recent. He won the Oscar. It was all about him and the speech impediment. But if you actually look at any pictures of King George, he looks nothing like Colin Firth at all. Even to the point where Colin Firth doesn't get his hairstyle slicked across like King George. And I've always loved the performance. I adore King's Speech. But my word, Ben Mendelsohn was scarily good, because not only does he naturally look like King George, when they put the costume on him and they give him not a British accent, but he takes on the role as King George, and he's only used in several scenes, not many, because he is a supporting actor. He was as phenomenal, and there are some brilliant scenes between the two of them.
Yeah, there's a great character arc between the two of them, as they sort of, when they meet each other at first, they're kind of not enemies, but sort of like he has to accept him in as prime minister because he's got no other choice, and then they find that respect for each other by the end of the movie. But is it too soon to get a remake of King's Speech with Ben Mendelsohn? No, I mean I loved oh god, blanking on his name. You just said it. King's Speech.
Colin Firth.
I loved Colin Firth in that movie. He won the Oscar for that movie, I believe, as well. And that was like fair enough. But no, you're right. He's got... It's dialed up more in this, but Ben Mendelsohn always has a unique voice to me. It's almost like he has a slight speech impediment himself, but it's very, very subtle. You can definitely pinpoint his voice. And I mean, I don't know much about the real life King George. I don't know if his stutter or his speech impediment was more like how Colin Firth played it, if they dialed it up more for that movie, or if it was more subtle and restrained like it was in this movie. Because there are still elements of that, and Ben Mendelsohn does bring that. There's moments where he'll be talking and he'll pause, and you can tell like he's trying to formulate his words and think about what he's trying to say and then say it. He's got a speech impediment where, you know, he'll say like the regional thing. He'll like switch his R's with his W's, which is kind of what Colin Firth did as well. But no, yeah, I love me some Mendelsohn now. And he's getting these, the only way I can describe it are like major supporting roles in a whole bunch of movies.
Well, he's done Rogue One.
Yeah.
He was in Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
Is it a TV show called Bloodline he's done, which is meant to be good or something like that?
I will check to see what else he's done.
He was in a very, very underrated film, Place Beyond the Pines, starring Ryan Gosling. Ben Mendelsohn is in that. He is, of course, being cast in the upcoming Captain Marvel film as the villain. Ready Player One, the villain. But if you look at some of the names he's worked with, Nolan, Spielberg.
Oh, nice. He's in an upcoming Robin Hood movie, and he's playing the Sheriff of Nottingham.
And you know that he is going to be amazing.
I don't know if he'll top Rickman in that role, but I shall wait and see.
In it, well, isn't the Robin Hood film like modern day or some? It looks like a very different Robin Hood film to the traditional stuff.
It's got a great cast. We've got Taron Egerton, we've got Jamie Foxx, we've got Tim Minchin as Friar Tuck. I'm down. I'm down. But that'll be a different review later this year, I'm sure.
Ben Mendelsohn, I thought was superb in the scenes he had, and I would just love to see more of him.
Yeah.
But when he's all geared up in his sort of the king's, I guess the king's speech, it more or less finishes with the beginning of World War II, but it's like maybe the final third where he does become the king. Whereas this, he's already the king and stuff. He's got Buckingham Palace. You obviously don't see Princess Margaret or the princess that later became obviously the current queen, but there are pictures on the desk and stuff, which is really cool. But those two have amazing scenes together.
You've got yeah, go on. Sorry,
I think to me they're the him and Oldman, obviously Oldman, but in his own world, but they're the two best performances of the film.
Yeah,
but that's not to look down upon anyone else. I think everyone is great at what they've got in the film.
Yeah, and you told me that oh god, what's his name? Lord Halifax, played by Stannis from Game of Thrones. I didn't realize it was Stannis until about 10 minutes before we hit record.
He has a very, very posh upper class lisp as well. It's basically Game of Thrones, except they're all planning on backstabbing Churchill to get Stannis in charge instead of it being the other way around for once.
But I love that side of it as well, because it wasn't just like the threat of war; it was like the kind of like the war in his own war council almost. It was like Game of Thrones. It was very backstabby. You can tell they didn't really have respect for him.
And he picked his rivals to keep an eye on them, to be in a war cabinet. And some of the best and tensest scenes of the film come from just the interpretation of one another. Obviously, I'm not going to go into the real life history of Neville Chamberlain, Lord Halifax, and many of us, but Churchill was a very outside choice for Prime Minister. He was obviously, he wasn't elected. He was brought in literally as Europe was about to fall to the Germans. Literally, I mean, if people keep thinking Dunkirk, I think the film starts May the 10th or something like that. So it's about 3 weeks before the Dunkirk evacuation. So it's that close. And if there's some witty person on the website saying that doesn't make an hour though, does it? Because it's called The Darkest Hour. Them kind of idiots I've seen on Twitter. It's like an hour of basically war, in all honesty. But my word, the screenplay was outstanding, I thought, and everything from the set design to the casting of each and every person. They looked like their real life counterparts as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I said this to you probably at record. Even not just because Stannis was in it, but this film felt like the very early seasons of Game of Thrones, where they're all playing politics of one another, and you just want to see more of it until it all builds up towards the end. Obviously, in this situation, we know the ending. It's Churchill, it's the Dunkirk evacuation, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought it was phenomenal.
Yeah,
and I mean that's just performances. Still, the film to me is carried through the performances.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's almost like, not to take any credit away from the film, it's almost like you're watching a stage play, like with these actors, like how good it is. And the film itself is quite intense as well. It is funny. Churchill's like wit and everything like that. Most of that you get from the trailers, like the big iconic lines he has. You've seen in the trailers. But because I've seen this film 2 times now at this point, what I noticed on the second time is like the look of the film itself. Not to draw too many parallels to the title itself, but it's not quite black and white. There is color in there, but it's a very muted film. It's very sort of desaturated. There's a lot of scenes where you're in these underground, war council rooms, and it's very darkly lit rooms with only like a lamplight in the corner, for example. And most of the films like that, when they come outside, it's very washed out and everything like that. And I think that plays to the film's effect. It gives it kind of that old-timey look just when you look at it, which I thought was a great choice. Because the director, I haven't seen anything he's done before. I know he's done Atonement, he's done Pride and Prejudice, so they're you sort of like big, sweeping British films. Recently, he did Pan, which was the Peter Pan film with Hugh Jackman as, was it Captain Blackbeard, with Nirvana playing in the weird film. So this is definitely a better film than that. I don't know where I was going with this. I was going somewhere else with this. The look of it, the feel of it, everything like that, perfect. The screenplay, everything like that. There was only one scene that I had a problem with, and it felt like it was the obligatory, patriotic scene, proud to be British moment. And it seemed a little bit easy. It felt a little bit cheesy, felt a little bit Disney-fied almost. There's a scene where Churchill rides the Underground, and he's only going one stop, but for some reason the scene goes on for about 10 minutes. I don't know if the Underground was slower back in those days. And he's talking to just regular civilians, and it's when he's deciding, he's torn whether he should commission peace talks with Hitler or whether they should just, stand and fight the Nazi regime. And he's getting all the opinions from the people, and there's like little kids saying like, we must fight them, and it felt very cheesy. That was the only scene that kind of drew me out of the film a little bit, that felt like they were taking it a bit too far. It's a sort of scene, and it feeds into the story. It's a very, very crucial scene for what comes afterwards and for the ending of the film. But that was the one scene that I had a problem with in this film. Everything else was perfect.
Right. I've just researched that because I didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
So in real life, there is no historical event of him on the tube talking to people. However, apparently, according to the internet, which, I mean, for political stuff is only true, via several books, Churchill would apparently occasionally go AWOL and just speak to members of the public about everything that's happening. So I guess there's some accuracy to it. You're right. It was the cheesy scene, I guess you could say, of the film. In a film like this, you'd expect the cheesy scene to be the speeches in Parliament, but they were the real like patriot moments. Whereas it was a cheesy scene. I thought it was a good scene though. It was very easy, if you know what I mean. It's like, here's all these people in shock and awe, and of course the final one he speaks to is the little child, and they're like, yeah, let's give it to the Germans. Let's never give up. But it was a cheesy scene. I liked it though. I was caught in the moment with it, but it did go on slightly too long.
Yeah,
but it was great to see, because normally Gary Oldman, he's very angry in a lot of the scenes. Some of the calmest Churchill moments, and it's that variety of the performance. Because some people think, well, if he's wearing makeup, his performance will be restricted.
Oh,
but it really isn't, which is even more of a credit to the makeup team.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the last thing I'll say is I think the film captures how close we were to the brink of war. With Dunkirk, you just sort of like caught up in the action, got to get everyone home. But with this one, it's like they are pretty much they are at the channel. They are about to come over. We are that close to being invaded. And I think that they dialed that up very well. You get some very nice shots where I think they bookend it. I think there's two shots like this in the film where Churchill's looking out the window in the car, it's just sort of like him observing the people of Britain, everyday civilians. Like you've got dustbin men, workers, you've got, I guess, trash collectors for those of you in America. Just everyone like that. And there was that scene, and then it's mirrored with one towards the end, and it's raining, and everyone's wearing like black umbrellas. It's a very sort of like on the nose image, but you really do capture that sense that they are getting close to war. And you've got that turmoil with Churchill, whether he tells the people the truth of how dire the situation is, or does he lie to them in order to keep their spirits up with hope? And I thought that the film does outline that very, very effectively and gets that across. Other than that, I really like the soundtrack. On a really, really quick note, Dario Marianelli is a name that I've recognized for other soundtracks, but I can't place anything he's done before this. But I guess I'm rambling at this point. I've pretty much said everything I can on this movie.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about it. The whole film comes down to Churchill. I will say is that the Churchill speech, everyone knows the speech. It's the final scene in the film. It's not a spoiler because it leads up to that, but that is without doubt one of the best scenes. And what I'll also say is everybody go on Google, search behind the scenes Darkest Hour. There's a video of all 500 extras in Parliament singing Hey Jude, and then it finishes with Gary Oldman coming in as Churchill, which is amazing. But back to the film though, this is one of the first films I've seen for Oscar season. I've seen a few actually, to be fair, but this is one of the real MVP ones I've seen that I'm excited for. I hope this goes more to the distance. It certainly will take makeup. I'm convinced it's going to take acting. The more award ceremonies have had, the more points at Oldman's direction, which I really hope it does. Because I'm sorry, Daniel Lewis might be well cast in Phantom Thread, but that's not the most boring film I've ever seen in my life. And I'll happily go on record to say that. It could be great. It probably is going to be great. But I'm not the biggest fan of... what have I forgotten his name?
Oh, Daniel Day-Lewis.
No, I love Daniel
Oh,
Day-Lewis.
oh, which one are we talking about
The
now?
director. What's the director of the new one?
Oh, oh, Christ.
There Will Be Blood. I've got a very different opinion to a lot of people. You know, and anyway, people know
Hang
who
on,
I mean.
I'm gonna find it.
You're annoyed as I. It's a three-bar name, but what I will say, this was an amazing
Paul
film.
Thomas Anderson.
But yeah, I'm not a big PTA fan. That's everyone calls me like. That's why. Not the biggest fan of his. I will see Phantom Thread because I have to, but yeah, this is Oldman's year. This film echoed that. It was fantastic to see. It comprehended the Dunkirk film from last year well. They don't clog each other up with the same stuff. There's an essence of the story, but this doesn't just show us how great Churchill is. It goes into some of his perhaps more dark moments. It brings up some of the real life past, like Gallipoli, that kind of stuff. He was no saint. This film does show that. But this is everything you want from a biopic, and some of the best biopics are set during specific eras.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic to see. And I can't really say I can't wait to see more. But I want to see what they do now, because normally off the back of a film like this, you might get a couple more British sort of films come out in the future years. So I'm very intrigued and excited for what's to come.
Yeah, this isn't one of your big sweeping World War films. It almost feels like a TV movie. That might seem like it's taken away from it, but this is definitely a film based on the performances. So if you're going into it with that frame of mind, you're definitely going to have a good time with it. Gary Oldman's already won a Golden Globe. I think the film's been nominated for 9 BAFTAs at this point. One for his performance. There's one for supporting role as well for Scott Thomas. That's not her full name.
Kristen Scott Thomas.
Kristen Scott Thomas. We didn't talk about, who was also great. All the cast was great in this film, and a bunch of others. This is definitely one to watch out for Academy Awards season as well. And I really hope that Oldman gets it. But we're going to keep doing reviews on all of the films that stand a chance at the Academy Awards or the BAFTAs or whatever. And we'll get the BAFTA winners out of the way, and then we'll be moving on to the Academy Awards nominations. We'll do a video on that where we go over all the list and give our own predictions as well. So look out for that in the coming few weeks. This was a video that was a change to the schedule today. There was meant to be a Coco review today. Unfortunately, we've had to push that back because our schedules weren't marrying up. But this week, look out for reviews for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Look out for a Coco review. And then as well, when we get into February, we've got a whole host of Academy Award films coming out. So, yeah, that'll do it for our review for Darkest Hour. Be sure to comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought of this movie. Did you like it? Didn't you like it? What other films are you looking out for this Academy Awards season? And, yeah, we'll see you next time, I guess. That'll do it. See you guys.